This is episode 7 of the Wilderness Locals podcast. On this episode, I chat with our buddy Cole to hear a couple of his stories and get some of his hunting history. This podcast is brought to you by Frontiersman Gear. High quality, completely custom handmade knives made in the heart of the Peace Country. As always, we are also brought to you by Just Shooting Arrows, BC's premier archery shop.
Especially with a general peg, I don't care. I just want to fill the tank. So like I'm out there to have a good time. Like typical like mule deer hunting, like if a 3x3 jumps up in front of me, like at a close range, that's like a slam dunk. I'm like, here you go, man, lights out. And then people are like, what'd you do that with day one? I'm like, I don't know, I like low-hanging fruit. It seems like elk hunting, right? Like, yeah, I'd love to kill a giant bull, but at the end of the day, that's every year we either need like an elk or moose in our household to feed everybody. And I'm like, I don't care if it's a cow or a little 3-point bull. Like, what's the difference? Like, for me, it's like, what's the difference between like a 200-inch elk or a cow? Like, I don't do anything with the antlers. Like,
yeah, if you're hunting for meat, what does it matter? And as long as it's legal and the biologists in your area are on board, who cares, right? I mean, one really funny thing I notice about you though is we'll be talking about whatever subject, and then you'll throw a photo over in our text messages, and it's like, whoa, like, I mean, you sent me some cat photos today that are insane, and haven't seen those on social media.
No, yeah, exactly. I only show them like probably 10 people pictures.
Yeah.
And it's because I don't want to end up in like CBC.
Yeah, I sent them to a couple buddies immediately.
Yeah, like there's, cougar hunting, anything like people are very passionate about like wolf hunting, coyote hunting, bear hunting, and cougar hunting for some reason.
Yeah.
It's like they see their pet when they see that animal dead.
Yeah.
So Alberta was pretty close to losing its cougar season the year I shot my cougar, actually.
Oh, really?
Some stuff hit the fan with a local guy who shot a cat, and it blew up. He was on like CBC everywhere. Harper's wife actually like said some derogatory comment to him like over Facebook or somewhere. I can't remember. Like, he was crazy. Yeah. Steve Harper's wife was like, "You're the scum of the earth." Basically, or whatever she said, or something about like the dick size or something like that. Like, it was insane. And then I was just like, I'm sitting there with this cat at his shop, proud as hell. And I'm just like, oh yeah, can you still go on the music? Like, I know somebody can find that. But yeah, like there's certain pictures like I won't share because it's just like.
Yeah, I think I put the first picture of my face on social media after I think I put the first picture of my face on social media in forever this year after I shot my mule deer, just because it was a really special deer to me. It was a spot that my hunting mentor has been hunting since he was like 13, and he knows the spot really well. And it's not like a spectacular deer or anything. It's just like a nice 4-point muley in a tough area that I shot with a guy that I don't know, it just means a lot to me. So I posted that one, but other than that, I don't post a lot. I don't know. That's why I think this podcast platform is so cool, because you can just get on here and kind of shoot the shit with your buddies and talk about stuff that matters, and kind of go from there.
Yeah, that's what I like, because I don't listen to many podcasts like at all.
Yeah.
And I seen you started one, and I was like, okay, like I'm gonna check it out. Cause like I know you guys. I started listening to it, and I'm like, oh, this is pretty sweet. This guys talk over hunting. It's a little bit better than the radio. Like, I spend some time in my truck a year driving all over Alberta for work.
Yeah.
And like you get tired of the radio. It's nice to hear people talk sometimes.
Yeah, for sure. So before we get too far down the rabbit hole, I've been starting all of these with who are you, what do you do, and how did you get started hunting? And I mean, you already touched on it that you grew up hunting, so we know that.
Yeah, my name's Cole O'Neill. Work in the oil and gas industry as an electrician in Alberta. And yeah, I just kind of like born into hunting. I think the first one of the first like really good memories I have is I think I was in grade 1. My dad took me on a bow hunt for elk, and he shot an elk with me.
Yep.
And I remember wearing like he had this like long sleeve like Predator camo shirt that was like a dress on me.
Yeah.
And I was like on his shoulders walking in the morning, ready to bring a cut off a herd of elk going off the field. And he like laid me down behind this log, gave me like 2 little fruit cups with a spoon. So then I'm like sitting there just crushing these fruit cups. And I remember him looking at me like, you can't scrape the side of the can with a metal spoon. Like, you gotta be quiet or you eat fruit cups. And then I can hear his bull just twisting off. And I can hear him like cow chirp a few times, and then all of a sudden I can hear like a cow mew, like an actual cow elk mew.
Yeah.
And he was standing like just behind me, and I was laying down on some logs like just in front of him. And all of a sudden I seen the arrow like fly over top of me from him, and there to whack.
Nice.
And I heard him like he was like fist pumping in the air, and I like sat up and looked, and he's like, "Oh, that cow elk was so close to you, I just shot." I was like, "Okay," and I was like my first bow, and I think I was 6 or 7.
So your old man was a bow hunter too?
Yeah, he still is actually.
That's awesome.
He's 64 this year.
Nice.
And yeah, he usually comes, he was an Alberta resident, grew up in Alberta, and he moved to Vancouver Island.
Yep.
Geez, when was that, 20, I don't know, like 6, 7 years ago.
Cool.
So I hunt it also pretty much every year, and either we do like a whitetail hunt or he comes hunt with me. So I think it was like 2017. I called him a bull elk, like on 14 yards. He whacked it, and then we caught some moose coming off a pea field, and just played away. And they kind of watched them and just kind of shot the into the bush, and ended up close to the trail that they were coming off on. He shot the moose feet like 2-3 days apart, and then yeah, it was pretty fun. That was probably one of the better hunts like I recently had. Like kind of good memories. He was smiling ear to ear. We came home, got a moose and elk. So
that's awesome. That's awesome. And then you had a pretty solid 2020 with you killed a nice whitetail, right?
Yeah, it was an okay whitetail. Like, I hunted like the kids and hockey and everything else and work. I haven't been as like I haven't been able to commit the amount of time like I usually do for the last couple of years, which is great. Like family's great and everything else. It just is what it is. Something's got to get right. Yeah. And this year, I don't know, just the way it worked, it was just I got to whitetail hunt a lot in November, and I don't even know how many stands I had with the bow, and it just wasn't working out. Like I had one buck that was pretty good for before I passed him in October with my sight set up something a little better out on camera, and then the third week in November, I was on an evening sit, and out of nowhere he just comes like hammering through the bush towards me, and I'm like, all right, this is sweet. Like I'm gonna this is my buck. Like I'm gonna take him home. And I probably should have drawn earlier, and that's something like really look at a hunt, like things you could have done better. Mm-hmm. That's one of them. Where he just speared by a spruce tree, and I was like, I should draw it. I'm like, no, I don't wait that long. He's gonna come to like 18 yards, walking broadside on this trail, and like he'll put his head behind one more tree. I'll draw, shoot him, shot done. And yeah, he got to like where I was gonna draw, he stops, lifts his head, starts licking his nose, gets my wind, and runs off.
Gone.
So yeah, and then after that, I was like, okay, this is not going well. Like,
yeah.
Well, right when I comes up with my old man, he shot a buck, and I seen him one that I passed. I was like, oh, he's not quite there. It's not what I want. And so it was and the bull zone bull hunt one more time. We had two doe tags. Yeah. So I shot 2 does back to back on the same stand, 20 minutes apart. And I was like, okay, I got sausage meat, like I'm good. I very admitted defeat in the season of whitetail hunting. Like I'm not shooting a big buck, whatever. So then I went back to where I took my buddy I was never hunting before. We went out hunting, and we spotted this buck, and I'm like, oh, okay. there's a buck and there's some does. He's chasing the buck, it's a buck chasing these does around the small, like, poplar willow bottom.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sitting there watching him, and then I'm looking at him, I'm like, he's big, he's mature, but he's probably 150 inches. And I'm like, I don't know. My buddy's like, are you going to shoot him? I'm like, he's itching to shoot him. And I'm like, I don't know, man. Like, and then all of a sudden, I like took over. I'm like, man, I'm sleeping right up to it. You're like, this is pretty good deal.
Yep.
So he was walking through some poplars. And right when he like was walking through an opening at the crosshair there, his shoulder stepped through and I showed the trigger, and he ran. I honestly thought I missed him. I'm like, oh god, this is awesome. Guys, first time hunting. I'm supposed to be some good hunter. I just like missed a 100-yard shot of a deer and maybe. So yeah, and we walked up there, and there's good blood and followed it through, not even 20 yards. He got him laid up under a tree. So
didn't go 20.
Didn't go 20. And then so me and Wasey hooked up elk hunting.
Yep.
Like first time we've ever really done a multiple day trip or multiple day trip, and we went up north, and he brought us. Usually bring my holiday trailer, and like we live pretty large elk hunting. Like it's we put a lot of miles on the boots, but like camp is like.
I heard
luxurious.
you suffered in a teepee with Wasey's farts from mountain houses.
So yeah, well, and not in like Sandy View cheese smokies. Like I brought like a bunch of cheese smokies that get made from deer sausage every year. And like that was a staple. He's like, "You got any more than cheese smokies?" I'm like, "I can't eat cheese smokies for 3 meals, man. Like I got to make something else." He's like, "I'm gonna cook some for myself." I'm like, "Okay, sounds good." But anyway, so to go back to this hunt, I'm like, I haven't like slept in a tent for like probably 5 years, man, on hunts. Like I haven't done any sheep hunting since probably 2013, 2014, somewhere in there.
Yeah. And
so like everything is like, I just got like a sleeping bag and crash in the holiday trailer, buddy's house, whatever.
Yeah.
I'm like to waste him. Like, let's just take my trailer. He's like, no, I got this teepee. It's sweet, which it was sweet, but like, I don't have like a teepee cot. I have like a wall tent cot.
Yeah.
Or like sleeping in somebody's garage or an enclosed trailer or something. So I'm like, I got this Cabela's cot. Took a picture of it. I'm like, I think it's too big. Like, do I need to get something else? He's like, no, dude, you're good. That'll fit. I'm like, okay. Not very confident about it. So then we go to get this. So I throw in like a little crappy Thermarest, like the foam one that has like tinfoil on one side and green on the other. It's like 3/8 of an inch thick.
Yeah.
So I throw that in too, and I'm like, I had one in my garage. I'm like, just in case. So we like roll up to camp. We go to this like one farmer's house that I've been hunting at his place for like almost probably 15 years.
Yeah.
And we go in there, and it's like, it's kind of getting late, and he's like, come in for a coffee. Like, you can't say no. So we're all right. So we're having coffee, and everything's good. Wasey starts talking about rodeoing with this guy. He's an old bronc rider where he used to ride bulls. They're just hitting it off. Know the same people. Yeah. Guys just in love, talking about the old rodeo days. And like it's starting to get late, and like it's supposed to rain all night. I'm trying to cut it short. I'm like, hey guys, like, we'll come back tomorrow and like do this. Like, we got to set a camp. So we go get this teepee all rigged up, get it all set up. I like go to get this like cot into the teepee. It's like, well, the stove's not going in, and Wasey, you're not coming in. And he's just like, okay. So I'm like, well, I brought this Thermarest. It won't be that bad. But like, it looked like we were in a hurry, and there were some little poplars in the way. Yeah. And we're both sleeping on cots, so it's like not a big deal. So I was like cutting poplars on like 45-degree angles, like beaver cuts. Yeah. So like that night, I found where all those poplars were in my back, and it was all right. It was a fun hunt, but the camp was like every day we tried to make it better, but it was hilarious. Man. It was so hot. Like,
all he wants to do is sleep in that teepee. That's it. That's like all he wants to do in life. We're doing that muley trip this year. He's like, hey, why don't we sleep in that teepee? I'm like, why, man?
He loves the teepee.
We're not even far from town.
So we go into this teepee, and I'm just like, it was hilarious. I'm like, every morning we'd like start the fire and warm up, and I'd be like, start the fires and spin the tires. Wasey, it's bugle time. He's like, we should just sleep in this morning. We should just sleep in. I'm like, no, man, we're going elk hunting. Let's do this.
Yeah.
So the first morning I was just like, we went on a death march. We called in 3 spikes that weren't legal. I think they had like forks or crutches on top.
Yeah.
And Alberta changed the laws this year so you can ride a ATV with a weapon on it like all day long.
What?
So like we hike like way back into this back end up on this ridge, and there's like a couple sweet licks and like tons of elk sign. And we're like, Lacey's like, this is good elk country. Like, I haven't seen sign like this ever. I'm like, yeah, it's pretty sweet. Like, there's a wallow everywhere. There's like rubs and just beat down spots. Just the elk have been there all summer, and they started riding in there and whatever. And then all of a sudden you hear like pop, like a quad's coming, and it shut off. And the guy'd bugle, and he'd drive and shut off. And like,
I heard it. I heard it wasn't the best bugle.
No, it was like straight up like the old school Thunder bugle that like a guy probably shouldn't use anymore. Like, yeah, it might get the job done, but it sounds awful. And Phil could call that a few times. It's probably not going to work.
Yeah.
So like legit, the guy's just bugling like with the old like Primo's Terminator or the Glenberry Thunder bugle, whatever it is. It's awful, hitting every note, just a whistle. And I'm like, oh, let's get out of here. So like literally that morning, I think we did like 15K or something. And like, it was after that rainstorm, and like we were soaked, like through our gaiters, our boots, everything was wet.
Yeah.
Our feet were just like smoked. Wasey's like, oh, I can't walk. I'm like, let's just go behind camp. I'm sure there's a couple elk on this side, whatever.
Yeah.
So we like we got up pretty early, and it was freaking hot out, man. It was like 20 some degrees. And we're up and hiking up this ridge and back end and kind of thinking where the elk are going to come from. And I'm like sitting there, we're laying in the grass, kind of sleeping and just sitting there. And then we look out, and there's this like bear, and he's like, he's okay. Like, he's a decent boar, nothing crazy, probably poking me up. And I'm staring at him, he's staring at him. I still got a bear tag, and I'm like, oh, okay, I'm gonna go try and get narrow on that bear. Lisa's like, yeah, man, you do you, whatever. So he's like,
he has a cheese smoky. He's good.
Yeah, he's laying there just hating his feet still probably. And he's kind of looking out the other way. You can still kind of see through the trees and see the field, built like for a half mile. And I'm like going up this ridge, and there's all these like drainages. You got to go up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down. Yep. Well, I didn't realize the bear like either walked off, winded me, or saw me, or just he disappeared.
Yeah.
So I kept popping these drainages. I couldn't see till like you get to the last point. And I get up there, and there's no bear. And I'm like, oh, this was not cool. So I like turn around, and Wasey's gone. So I'm like, what the heck? So then go back down, meet up with him. He's like, man, there's like 8 or 9 elk out in the field. Maybe we should go after them. I'm like, yeah, maybe I should stop messing around with bears.
Yeah.
So we started like, we got to go across a full quarter section of an alfalfa field that just got baled, and like it's wide open, and the elk are just on the edge of the quarter line feeding. So I'm like, man, like, how are we going to do this? We got the wind, and we're just going to like leapfrog the bale. So I'm like, all right.
A lot of the BC folks won't know what a quarter piece is.
A quarter section?
Yeah.
A half mile by half mile.
There you go. Okay.
So it's like 800 meters long. So we're jumping bale to bale, hiding behind each bale on the farmland. And Wasey's like, I look over, man, and he looks like he's going to die. I'm like, what's wrong with you? He's like, I got a shit. I'm like, what? I'm like, man, like these elk are here. Like if we got a chance, we got to do it now. And he's like, no, man, just like, it was just like, I'm dying. Like, leave without me, man. Like, you're better off. He's like, I can't. And I'm like, well, where are you going to shit, man? It's wide open here. And there's like one little like willow tree with like 20 yards by 20 yards of like thistles. And I'm like, we can't just take a greasy shit in the farmer's field and leave it here. Like, we're gonna just like, he's gonna be like, you guys are animals. He's like, oh no, I'm gonna go in the thistle patch. I'm like, you do you, man. And like literally he was like ripping the because I always pack like usually in like a Ziploc bag, so it's like you get nice dry toilet paper no matter what the weather is. And he's like literally like ragdolling me to get this toilet paper out of my pack as I'm standing there. So I'm like, all right, we're good. So we get going, or I get going. I'm like leapfrogging. I'm in like 400 yards from the elk, maybe 300 yards from the elk, and I'm getting a little nervous. So I hold up and I'm waiting. And finally I look back. Here comes the waste dog. He's trotting and he's healthy. He's happy again.
Yeah.
and he meets up with me, and we're like, okay, what are we gonna do here? And he's like, well, let's just ease up and we'll just see what we can do. So we ease up on the elk, get to like 150, 200 yards of the elk. There's a legal bull, a couple spikes, some cows, and they're feeding, and the bulls are chasing each other around and whatever. And
yeah.
the wind isn't ideal. It's like kind of coming across, and I'm like, if they want, they can get our wind. Like, I don't think we can call them in. And I've never had good luck calling elk in on the field with a bow. Like, it's never been good for me.
Yeah.
My best action is going to be in the bush always. So I'm like, I don't know, man. We're sitting there just kind of whispering, stand behind a couple poplars, and we're like, and like our backs are like fully exposed. Like we got cover in front of us, but nothing behind us. And I'm like, man, we should just back out of here. I know how to get in here in the morning without spooking them off the field. But we'll cut them off in the bush, and we'll get after him. And he's like, okay, yeah, that's probably good. We'll just watch these elk or something. I'm like, all right. And then he just turns around and he's like, don't freak out. But there's a bull elk standing right behind us. And I'm like, what? So I turn around, and sure enough, here's this bull elk standing, like Wasey was like leaning on a bale, and he let a couple cow chirps go like while we were walking there the last like little bit.
Yeah.
And I never heard it, but he's like, man, it's like I heard this like the most wimpiest, faintest, like lightest, stupidest bugle I've ever heard. And I'm like, I didn't hear anything, man. I just heard my feet shuffling through alfalfa. So that was that bull. And he was like, I think he's like a 3x4 or a 4x4. I don't know what he was. But so we're looking at him, I'm like, man, that's like the smallest bull ever. He's like, yeah, it's like a bull but smaller, like a little baby bull. So we're sitting there like looking at him.
Yeah.
And we're like looking at him, and we're like trying to make sure he's legal. He's got to be 3 points.
Yeah.
All 3 points got to be 3 inches. So we're looking at him like, oh yeah, he's got to have 4 or 5 inch points minimum. Like he's legal. He's just got like 20-inch beams, like, at best.
Yeah.
So he's like, okay. I'm like, well, he's like, I'm gonna get behind you here, and I'm gonna let some cow chirps go. I'm like, dude, that's not gonna work. Like, I'm standing up on like his dirt mound, like skyline, like we're toast.
Yeah.
But we got the win. So I'm like, okay, the next bale he walks behind, I'm going to run out to the edge of the field and like get a low spot. And he's like, okay. So he like literally walks behind a bale, and I just hustle and just like, and not graceful, man. Just like everything's rattling.
I always picture that Beverly Hills Ninja, that Chris Farley scene where he's
just like a chubby guy rolling into position. Right?
You sent that to us when we were in Alberta too.
Yeah. So I got like 10 pieces of grass in front of me, and like probably like the ditch, and I'm like kneeling down, and it's probably like up to my neck, and my big head is popping out. And Wasey like literally lays down on the elk trail face down and puts his hat like over his head, and he starts like cow chirping into the dirt. And this bull like lifts his head, and he's getting all like kind of curious, and he's trotting around out in the field, and he won't commit. And I'm like, oh, I wish we had a decoy or something. I'm like, I freaking hate calling elk out in the open. This isn't going to work. And then I'm like staring out in the field, and I hear like a snap. And I look to my left, and there's 3 spikes, like just coming out of the bush, and they're like 80 yards. And they're staring towards like where Wasey's laying down in the dirt. So they
stinking like cheese smoky.
Yeah, they're like coming towards old cheese smoky there, and Wasey doesn't know they're there. But they're like gonna like eventually like this other bull wants nothing to do with us, little baby bull that I shot, and these like 3 spikes are coming towards me, and I'm like trying to signal him somehow, like kind of making hand movements off to my side because I thought he could see me maybe.
Which
I'm like,
never works.
Stop calling.
Never works ever.
Like, these spikes are going to step on me. Like, stop calling. And literally the spikes were at 20 yards or less. And that bull, like, is like, finally he's like, well, there's a cow over there. There's 3 other elk. Like, I'm coming over now. So he just, like, throws his head back and starts trotting. And I'm like, oh, boy. And here I am, man, just, like, rattled, just shaking, like just trying to get stuff straight, get my like make sure my arrows on my string good and tight, and like my release is ready, and put down my wrist strap, and I'm like, okay, grab a rangefinder because like it's a bit of a poke out into the field, and I'm like, okay. have my sight loose and ready to dial. Boom, get a range on him. He goes broadside. He's like broadside, locks onto me at the same time, and I'm like, this is it's either gonna happen now or it's not gonna happen. Like I got 4 blokes staring at me. Wasey has no clue what's going on. Just frantically, like somebody's like punching a hoochie mama, cow calling into the dirt, and like
time to send it. Let's go. Right.
I'm like, time to send it. So I draw back. He lets me draw. I'm like, okay. I anchor. I'm like, oh, done deal. So I'm like, as I'm settling my pin on him, I'm like looking at the alfalfa because I'm like so down low. I'm like, I hope I'm not going to cut the heads off all this alfalfa. And like, before my arrow like gets mark and gets above it.
Yeah.
I'm like, I think I'm good. I think I'm good. I literally like I shot, and then I heard the arrow. I saw the arrow going, and then I kind of lost it, and then I heard the hit, and then Wasey's like, "Oh yeah, that sounded like guts." And I'm like, no, it's good. Watch him. And he like ran maybe like 50, 60 yards, and his like ass end started trying to pass the front, and he just like toppled over dead.
Yeah.
And I'm still jacked up. I'm like, I can't believe that worked. I'm pumped. So I like fist pump in the air. I go running over to talk to Wasey. He's like 20 yards away. And as I'm running, there's like a root or something sticking up. And like, I'm just like excited, not even looking where I'm going. And I hit this root, and I literally like just stretch forward, and like all my weight goes right onto my riser into like the dirt.
You just spike your bow into the ground.
Yeah, Wasey's like, I'm like, I just stand up and leave my bow in the dirt, and he's like, "Oh man, your bow." I'm like, "Who cares? I don't need it anymore. I got it now.
I'm done. Yeah, I'm out."
Yeah, he's like, that kind of looks bad. I'm like, "Oh no, it's good. It's good. We'll just get the mud out of the cans and we'll be fine."
It's funny too, man. How like, I guess maybe we should clue people in. You're the kind of guy that has probably a couple hundred animals on the ground, right?
Yeah, I don't know. Like I used to keep track, and then I just kind of stopped.
Yeah.
I think like I shot an animal every season since I was 12 with my bow, at least one.
Yeah.
And then some seasons obviously are better than others, but
there you go. And so what I was going to say, where I was going with that is it's crazy how you can be shooting your first deer with your bow or with a rifle, and you got typewriter leg and shit streaming down both legs. And then you get to your, 200th animal or something, and it's the same effect. Doesn't matter. It never changes.
Yeah, I'm like, this is like the biggest meat bolt ever. Like we're talking second set of antlers, just a legal bolt, put some meat in the freezer, and like we're both excited. Like we're high-fiving.
Yep.
And like it's good. But I think if that ever ends, I think then like, I don't know, that I don't think I'd really want to hunt anymore. Like I lose that appeal, but
yeah,
it's exciting, right? Like hunting, like, I don't know, you always have remorse for what you do, but at the end of the day, it's like, if I don't kill an animal, somebody's got to kill an animal for me, because like I'm eating meat.
Yep.
So, and that's the way I look at it. Just people are like, oh, how do you hunt? And, this and that. And I'm like, well, it's your choice if you want to hunt or not. Like, whatever. Yeah. And like, I don't judge you. Don't judge me. Like, if you need, a slaughterhouse or a farmer, whoever to kill and butcher your animal, that's cool. Like, I do it myself.
Yeah, I don't contract out my death.
Which is whatever. Because I have people at work, like, I'll wear like a hunting shirt, a camel coat, something at work, and I've had people at work come up to me. They're like, "Oh, you hunt?" I'm like, "Yeah." They're like, "Oh, I just want to let you know I'm okay with that."
You're like, "Okay, cool."
I'm like, "Yeah, thanks for letting me know that you're okay that I hunt on my personal time, and that's how I feed my family." Like,
let them know that you're okay with them eating McNuggets.
Yeah, I'm like, sure, bud, whatever.
I'm cool with it.
But yeah, no, that was a fun hunt. Like, I've done a few elk hunts like with buddies or my cousin that were just riots. There's a couple backpack hunts we did where we shot some elk in some places we probably shouldn't have gone.
Yeah.
It took like a full day, or my last one with him was a day and a half, and they're just like, literally, you're just sitting there eating like Tylenol, like their vitamins, because you're like, you just have to embrace how bad it's gonna feel. You're like, oh yeah, I'm okay with it.
Yeah, it can be bad, man.
Elk hunting's probably like definitely one of my favorite things to do, for sure. I always try to make a week for it in September.
Yeah,
and then everything else is kind of like whatever else I can get to run in front of an arrow or bullets, kind of works.
Yep.
Really
For sure.
after that.
For sure. So, I mean, out of those couple hundred animals we're talking about here, there has to be a couple that stand out for you. I mean, you've sent me some photos of some pretty wicked whitetail in your office there.
Yeah, like, but there's two good ones that Bo killed.
Mm-hmm.
They're pretty special to me. Probably the most special deer I have is actually a rifle kill.
Oh, cool.
And it's just the history of the deer. Like, I started hunting the deer. I got trail cam pictures of him in 2012, and Bo hunted my brains out with him. Seen him, had video of him. I used to film my hunts back then. I had like video of him out in the field, just out of range, like so many nights in a row, all this stuff. And then in 2013, I couldn't really get on him early. I couldn't find where he was feeding. I had so many trail cams. I knew he was around, but I just couldn't figure out where.
Yeah.
I finally got pictures of him. Actually, that buck that you took a picture of and put it as like a thumbnail or something, I shot him in 2013. So it was like, work was crazy.
I did?
Yeah. There was like a picture of me with like a, 5-point that was like really wide.
Yeah. I put it in our story. Yeah.
Yeah. So I bow killed that one like in 2013 because I was like, okay, like season's over. I got a kid on the way. My wife's pregnant. Like I just changed jobs. I don't have vacation. Like that's a pretty good buck. Like, he was like 140 inch gross deer, old mature deer. I'm like, good enough. Boom, shot it, done.
Yeah.
So then my wife's like pregnant. She's like, oh, I'll go deer hunting a little bit. So whatever. I had a few trail cams out. Boom, I get pictures of this deer, and I'm tagged out. I'm like, oh my god, like this is how it always goes.
Yeah.
So she's had a few times for him and never got it done. And then in that year, actually in December, my good buddy Scotty, he actually found the sheds. Like, I think it was about a mile or two away from where, probably almost 2 miles from where I was hunting.
Oh, cool.
They were like laying in the ditch. One was like in the ditch and one was hanging on the fence. It was from that morning that deer had crossed the road and jumped the fence and lost both the antlers.
Oh.
And he was like, I think we gave the antlers like a 17 or 18 inch inside spread, and I think he was like 175 inch gross deer, non-typical, like just a really nice deer.
Yeah.
And we're like, dang. And Scott's like, he had the antlers, like he found them, like whatever. And he's like, I'm going to keep these antlers. And if you ever shoot this deer, I'm going to give you his antlers. I'm like, that's a good deal.
Yeah. So,
a couple more years go by and I just no sight of this buck. I'm like, the winter got him, he shed early, whatever.
Yeah.
And in 2016, I was, so it was like 4 years later from my first encounter with him. I'm sitting there and I'm like, in like not a bad mood, but like my wife's with me, the kids are with me, and I'm like, I think I had a laptop or an iPad with me or something, checking trail cam pictures, and I'm like looking at a couple trail cam pictures, it's like does and cow moves like usual. I'm like, ugh,
yeah,
whatever. And I'm just like in a mood where I'm like, whatever, there's no good deer around, I'm just not gonna shoot anything. And my wife and I just like kind of tossed my iPad or laptop on my center console and went to the gas station and went to go fill my truck up. My wife's like, for whatever reason, like I probably would have like deleted that SD card and never looked back.
Yeah.
Because I was just like, there's nothing worth hunting here. I'm not coming back to the spot. And then my wife's like, was like bored or something. She picks it up while I'm filling up the truck and paying for it and everything. And she keeps going. And the last picture is this buck in velvet, and he's like just rank.
Nice.
Like huge bases, like just he lost inches, but he's just massive and like just the body of a bull on him. And I'm just like, so I come back to the truck and she's like, I think you're gonna like me, like I gotta show you something. I'm like, what?
That's awesome.
She's like, holds it up, and I'm like, whoa, where's that? And she's like, that was on your trail cam. Remember you were like, oh, I'm not gonna look at this anymore, it's a waste of time, I'm tired of looking at cow moose.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh man. So I'm like, instantly, like by then it's already like probably second week of September. And it's just a trail cam I've had out all summer. I just never really checked because I'm just kind of down on myself that there's no good deer around. And, I should have just kept going. But, I was like, oh, whatever. There's nothing good worth hunting here. I got to figure out what I'm going to do. So then I was kind of playing like catch up, trying to find stand locations, figure out where you're feeding and all that stuff. And I got a couple other blurry pictures of them coming through at night. Going out to fields, and I'm like, hey, I think he's here. And, I sat a few times with Bo and never seen him.
Yeah.
And I was just like, oh, whatever. So then it was like November 1st, opening day of rifle season, and I'm like laying in bed, and I'm like, I should go pull down my trail cams, and like so they don't get stolen off the field edge by somebody rifle hunting, and like I should just bring my gun in, like just in case I might see him, like whatever.
Yeah.
So like I'm like, all right. So I'm wearing like Wranglers, a hoodie, and it's like just finished like fresh snowing, and I got my bino harness on and my 270 short mag, and I'm like, all right. I'm like, I'm just gonna walk in, I'm gonna grab this trail cam, and I'm just gonna check the back end of this standing grain field.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, walk in, look over one hill, there's like nothing. And it's like, it's cold, there's snow, it's standing grain, like there should be deer out, there's nothing. And I'm the only one in there, so I'm like, whatever. So then I go over the next hill, look, nothing. I'm like, typical, sweet. So I'm like, there's like one little last spot to check, and I'm like, I should just keep walking and check this one little like thin strip of like between some willows and some big bush. And I like poke my head around the corner, man, and like the naked eye is probably like 120 yards, and I'm like, oh man, like that's him for sure.
Nice.
So I grab my binos, throw them up out of my bino harness, and I don't even remember doing this, but I literally took my binos and threw them over my shoulder like they were like garbage. And I was just like, because I was just like, I just like lifted my binos up, got them like within like the binos, and I was just like, whoa, and just like threw them over my shoulder. Threw my gun up. There was like a poplar like the size of my thumb to steady my gun on. I'm like, just breathe, just be calm, just let the crosser swing across him, pull the trigger, boom. I shoot him, I bolt another one, and he's running. I didn't hear the hit. I'm like, I don't know if I hit him. I shot one more at him on the run, and I'm like, I don't know if I hit him. I missed him.
Yeah.
So I'm like, and then there was a couple other deer over the hill, and I seen like a tail running out the one end, and I'm like, oh, okay, you went that way. So I'm like, where's my binos? I'm like kicking around, so finally find. I was like, I don't even know how they got over here. So then I walk through this field all the way to the end, like 200-300 yards to where I last saw this, what I thought was him, and I'm like, find some fresh tracks. There's no blood. I'm like, oh, perfect. Missed him. Right on. Your only chance is deer. Like, you failed. So I'm like literally walking back down the fence line towards the last spot I shot at him on the run, just kicking like stubble, just mad at myself, looking at the ground, not even looking up. And I literally tripped over top of him. Like, I was looking like 6 inches in front of my boots, just mad at myself. And he's just laying there piled up. Nice. And I'm like, what? I'm like, oh my God. Like I hit him dead nuts. Like he's dead. Like this is awesome. Like I don't know what I was looking at. So my good buddy Scotty came out. He got the shed antlers. He gave them to me. We took some pictures. It was sweet. It was like, it was just a bittersweet. He wasn't as big as he was in his prime, but he was probably like an 8 or 9 year old buck that just,
that's awesome.
Consumed a bunch of my life. And so I got him shoulder mount and threw in my office. And,
that's awesome.
Yeah, he's definitely a deer I'm proud of for sure.
Nice. So has your wife got her first deer yet?
Yeah, she's like a little assassin. She
they always are.
Yeah, she got 2 years ago. I called in a bull moose for her, and she got her first bull kill was a bull moose.
Nice.
That was a little intense. Like, sitting there, and I'm actually my dad and my brother-in-law with me, and there's 4 of us, and we're trying to get her a moose, and my brother-in-law, and we had one night, one morning to hunt for childcare, and I'm like, oh my God, we got to get this done. Yeah. So I'm like talking to my brother-in-law, just stressed out. I'm like, I'm gonna go. Like, I think I got to go to this spot. I know there's moose there. He's like, no, man, come to my spot. Like, I got moose. It'll happen. Yeah. I'm like, are you sure? He's like, yeah, just come to my spot. Meet me here. We're gonna go. I'm like, all right. So my dad was up visiting, so he's like, yeah, I'll come for a walk with you guys and just hang back and watch. So we started walking, and we hit this cut line, and I was the first one in the lead for whatever reason. I just happened to just kind of edge up in this cut line and look down, and there's a bull moose down there. And I'm like, oh, there's like a 30-inch bull moose standing in the middle of the cut line 200 yards away. I'm like, this is perfect. So everybody I stepped back, checked the wind did, and we all kind of talk, and I'm like, okay, well, I'll take her up front, and you guys just do some raking and some bull grunts, and we'll see if we can get them fired up. Yep. And they let a couple grunts and some raking, and they let one cow ball, and I heard him reply once, just and I was like, okay, well, he's still there, but I'm like, okay, we'll move up a little bit, and they checked the wind, and the wind's still good, and I'm like, man, what's going on? He won't come. So I go back, talk to my dad and my brother-in-law, I go back, I'm like, hey, I don't know what's going on. He won't come. Like, I need to get her wind. I have no idea. So I'm like, everybody stay here. I'm just going to go to the edge of the line and see if I can see him. So I go to the edge of the line, and I see a cow and a calf moose standing there, and I don't see him.
Yeah.
And I'm like, bingo, this makes sense. He's got a cow and a calf. Why would he want to come, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's October or September 29th or 30th. It's like the rut's happening. Why would he want to leave his cow to come see me?
Yeah.
So I'm like, hey, you guys stay here. They're like, what are you guys going to do? I'm like, I'm going to go right at him, and we're going to put some pressure on him, and I'm just going to bull grunt like I'm another bull coming in there, and put some pressure on him and fire him up, make him want to come to fight me. So they're like, okay. So I got my wife right behind me. I'm like, stay like right on me, like you're going to push me with your bow. Stay right tight to me. We're going to walk these moose. So we start walking down this cow line, and we get to where the cow and calf are. And I don't know what she was thinking at the time, but we push forward, and the cow and calf trot in front of us at 25 yards. And like in a full like outdoor voice, she's like, oh, look at those moose. And I'm like,
that's awesome.
And then like I have my bow on my head, I have my birch bark in my mouth, and I'm like swaying, and I'm like every walk, trying to like get this bowl of fire. And she's just like, look at those moose. And I turned around and I was like, are you serious right now? And then she's just like, oh, sorry. So I keep going, right? I keep going, and all of a sudden I hear, and he's coming, right? And I can hear poles breaking, and then he's coming through some alder, and I'm like, hey, get off this line. We got to get in the bush with him. Like, we're going to get right in the midst with him. Like, we'll get in tight. We got the wind. And here he comes, eyes rolled back, see the whites of his eyes. You see, like, the snot coming out of his nose, and he's just swaying, and every step it's a grunt. Every step it's a grunt. And I'm like, okay, I hope my wife can hold it together, because I can't right now. I'm like, okay, get ready, knocking her. I'm like, okay, I'll tell you how far it is and what's going to hold. Because like, we practice in the summer, and she's got a 26-inch draw length, a short little arrow, 45 to 48 pounds of poundage. Like it's a low setup, low kinetic energy setup with a small fixed blade broadhead. And I'm like, we can only shoot 30 yards max. We need a broadside shot, etc. Right? Yep. So here comes his bull, and I'm like, click on him like 25, and I'm like, keep draw. And I'm trying to get him to stop, and he won't stop. And he's circling us, trying to eventually get our wing. And he comes right through some alders, and she's a full draw for probably, 15, 20 seconds. I'm like, no, let down. She's like, oh, no, I can get a shot off right here. And she lets one go, and I'm like, no. And it, like, goes, and, like, her arrows are so light that it literally hits an alder branch and, like, stops dead, and then, like, sticks him. Like, probably goes in, like, 3 inches, like, into his liver.
Oh.
Sticks him in the liver, and there's an arrow hanging out the side.
Oh.
And I'm like, oh, it's over. Like, that's I don't know what, like, this is bad.
We'll come back tomorrow.
The bull literally, like, rears up and runs towards us, and now stops and starts swaying again, and starts, like, just breaking a tree off with his antlers, like the other bull, like, stabbed him or something. Mm-hmm. And at this point, he's at, like, 12 yards. And I'm like, to my wife, like, with, like, choice words, I'm like, get a freaking arrow on your bow, draw that thing back. Like,
shoot that thing.
At this point, I'm scared. Like, this thing isn't stalking, and like, Lucy's got videos too, like where a moose just won't stalk, and then he gets close enough, and he puts his antlers down and takes a run at you, right?
Yeah.
And I got no trees in between me, and I got like a couple small like poplars, and I'm just sitting there, and I'm getting nervous. And I don't think my wife, luckily, she didn't realize like the seriousness of it that I thought was going to happen.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you need to draw. And then, like, instantly she got an arrow on. She drew instantly, and like just barely anchored. Probably put every pin she owned on that moose, and then just like let her go. And like that arrow hit him dead nuts.
Nice.
And I'm like, yeah, we got him. And he runs, and he actually ran back towards my dad and brother-in-law. And they heard a bull go off twice, and they're like, man, what, she miss him or something? And he just ran straight out towards them, and then he stopped, and they're like, well, she must have missed him. And he's just standing there, and then all of a sudden he just did a lip stand right in front of him, on his nose down, like that was it.
Oh, wow.
And they're like, holy man, she got him.
That's awesome. I'll tell you why I ask is because I got a text message, I think it was, I don't know, yesterday or the day before while I was working, from my wife. And she goes, hey, you think we could get your folks to watch our kids for a couple of days and you and I can go on a moose hunt this year? I was like,
you're like, heck yeah.
Oh, buddy. Yeah, let's do it. I'm going to take her with a rifle, though. But, yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, every year we like, my wife puts in for draws, and
Yep.
you know, I wouldn't say she's like a crazy hardcore hunter, but she definitely likes to get out, and she
That's awesome, man.
she gets out, and you know, we shoot her tags, or she shoots her tags, I should say, and like yeah, she's shot a couple moose and an elk and a few deer and stuff like that, and so yeah, that's good.
That's awesome, man. So we're over an hour here, and I want to save some stuff for next time. But thanks so much for coming on, man, and it's always a pleasure BSing with you.
Yeah, for sure, man. It's always good, and yeah, your podcast is good to listen to. I like it. It's just guys talking.
Yeah, thanks, brother. Okay, we'll talk to you soon. Thanks for listening to the Wilderness Locals podcast. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe to our channel and give us a follow on Instagram @Wilderness Locals.